Money, servants, dinners, parties, and glittering dresses. Emma Whitmore had it all. Born into wealth and married to a successful businessman, her 19th century New York City life was filled with luxury and prestige. Emma moved effortlessly among the city's elite. Her world seemed complete. Yet beneath the surface of this glittering life, a greater purpose awaited her, one that would transform her heart and the lives of countless women lost in the city's shadows. Welcome to Church History. I'm your host, Lorelee Siemens. Well, we survived January, which is the longest month of the year. I hope your January was wonderful. I've been busy editing podcasts, doing voiceover work for my clients, and I'm sitting in my office, which is a sunroom, and I'm watching the snowfall outside. It is beautiful, and it's such a nice view, as long as you are inside a warm house. I've also been busy writing chapters for my next book, The Church is Reformed, which tells the story of the Reformation. But if you've ever wondered what led the church to where it desperately needed reformation, you can read my second book. And here's a commercial for that book. My new book, The Church is Corrupt, is available for order. I previously published the book, The Church is Born, which was part 1 in our series, and that delved into the creation of the church. But my second book picks up where the first one left off. It offers a unique and insightful perspective on the church's journey. Discover the rich history of the church, its triumphs, its failures, and its heroes. In this second book in the series on church history, we journey through the pivotal moments that shaped Christianity as we know it. From the foundational theology of the early church to the inspiring lives of great men and women who boldly stood for their faith. Explore the church's role during the Crusades, the Inquisitions, and even the discovery of America. Learn how over centuries the church began to slowly lose its way, setting the stage for the monumental changes just before the Protestant Reformation. With each chapter highlighting a different story, you're going to be inspired by the heroes of our faith and challenged to reflect on the lessons from the church's successes and its stumbles. Whether you're a seasoned historian or just beginning your exploration of church history, this book offers valuable insights for everyone. Both books, The Church is Born and The Church is Compromised, are available on Amazon for you to order. So if you haven't gotten the first book, why not get both today and delve into the comprehensive understanding of the church's journey? Let's get into today's episode. In 1842, New York City was a bustling hub of growth and diversity. Its streets teemed with people from all walks of life. Life in the city offered challenges and opportunities for a devout Christian family. If you're interested in the history of New York City, I had some episodes in the past about the founding of the city, and I'll put links to those in the show notes. The Industrial Revolution transformed New York into this rapidly expanding metropolis. It drew immigrants and workers who were searching for a better life. The population was nearing 400,000, and the city was alive with commerce. But it was also full of poverty. Christian families turned to their faith to navigate the complexities of urban life. Churches were central to their existence, not just for Sunday worship as a place of community, but the church was also where they went for their education and their moral guidance. The evangelical revival, like the Second Great Awakening, still influenced the city. And there was a fervor for missions, and also the church wanted to impact social reform. Families, like the Whitmores, deeply rooted in their faith, would have felt a strong calling to engage with all of these movements. They saw their city as both a field ripe for evangelism and a mission field in need of God's transformative power. What was daily life like for Christians in New York during this time period? Well, a lot of it revolved around family prayer, Bible study, but mostly charitable acts. There was the Temperance Society, there was abolitionist movements, and urban missions, which provided opportunities where you could go out and live your faith in tangible ways. At home, parents would instill values of hard work, humility, and mostly compassion. They wanted to equip their children to face moral and spiritual challenges that the city was giving them. For young girls like Emma Whitmore, growing up in this environment would have both grounded a strong Christian faith, but also you would have seen firsthand social needs. So the year was 1842, and New York was bustling with energy as the city grew into this hub of commerce and culture. And in this vibrant backdrop, Emma was born into a devout Christian family. Her early life was shaped by prayer and service, and her parents, deeply committed to their faith, installed in her the belief that true fulfillment came not just from material wealth, but from a life devoted to God and serving others. In their household, acts of kindness and generosity were not just occasional gestures. This was a way of life. Now, Emma grew up in the shadow of New York's wealth and affluence, but her heart was also drawn to the quieter, steadfast example of her family's faith. She attended church regularly, listening to sermons about compassion, humility, and the transformative power of God's love. To say her family lived comfortably would be putting it nicely. Emma had anything she could ever want. However, she did see the needs of people less fortunate, and she did have compassion for them. Emma met and fell in love with Sidney Whitmore, who was a wealthy, successful businessman. Emma was in her early 20s at that time. Sidney was also from a very wealthy family, and he also shared her faith. Their marriage was a union of not only faith, but also fortune. Sidney admired Emma's gentle spirit, and he shared her commitment to God. This was a bond that would become the bedrock of their relationship. Together, they became active in their local congregation. Emma used her talents to organize church events, and Sidney offered the financial support. Now, the couple's wealth afforded them a life of luxury. They attended lavish dinners, grand social gatherings, where Emma would arrive in a glittery gown. This was just part of their everyday world. And although on the outside it seemed as if Emma had the perfect life, she was actually battling years of health issues. For 12 long years, Emma endured pain from a fractured vertebrae. Often the pain would get so bad, she would have to stay in bed and she would not have any mobility. She became desperate for relief. And when people suggested her visiting a minister named A.B. Simpson, at first she didn't want to. But reluctantly, she eventually agreed to go and visit him. A.B. Simpson was the founder of the Christian and Missionary Alliance Church. She was very skeptic, and this skepticism just gripped her. But after days of prayer and scripture study, Emma eventually surrendered her body to God for healing. The answer came in a moment of quiet faith. For the first time in over a decade, Emma didn't feel pain. Emma's healing was more than physical. This was the turning point in her life. This was the moment that ignited her spiritual purpose. In the following months, Emma prayed and asked God for clarity on how she was to use her newfound strength. One day, when she was praying, an image of the girls on the street came to her. These were women who were trapped in lives of exploration. Suddenly, these pictures began flooding her mind. Was God calling her to reach out and love women who were working on the streets, selling their own bodies? This thought terrified her, and she pleaded, "Anything but that, God. Please do not call me to that." But as she continued praying, these images kept coming to her mind, and she knew the call was unmistakable. And eventually, Emma submitted to the daunting mission. of reaching the lost women of New York's streets. Emma's journey into this dark world was not alone. Her husband, Sidney, came with her. First, they visited Jerry McAlley's Water Street mission. This visit changed her life. As she walked along the squalor and despair of the city's roughest neighborhoods, Emma witnessed a side of life she had actually never encountered. She couldn't believe the filth and the fighting. And then she saw women being dragged away by police. She heard women screaming. This was a far cry from the wealthy, influential ballrooms she had frequented. But there, in the middle of all this chaos, Emma saw the undeniable power of God's grace. She met with women and heard testimonies of these women being redeemed out of addiction and out of crime and out of sin. And these stories humbled her and her husband, Sidney. They left that day knowing what their new life purpose was. Determined to make a difference, Emma poured herself into the work. She began working with a mentor named Maria McAuley. Together, they ministered to the broken and the forgotten women of the streets. Her work was emotional and incredibly spiritually draining. She had to rely on prayer to sustain her, and that meant spending many hours each day in prayer. Often she felt she could no longer face the horrors of the mission, but God renewed her strength and filled her heart with love for those she served. It was through faith, perseverance, and obedience that Emma Whitmore left behind a legacy of redemption. Her healing that she received that day wasn't just for her body, it was for her soul. On October 25th, 1890, Emma Whitmore stepped out in faith once again, opening the first door of hope in New York City. This humble and yet groundbreaking refuge was designed to provide safety and salvation for young women who were looking to escape the streets and find a new path. This was a place for women who had once sold their own bodies, who now wanted freedom. This was a bold leap for Emma, who had relied entirely on God's provision for this ministry. In fact, she refused to hold fundraisers, and she refused to publicly appeal for donations. Instead, she would pray and place her trust in God's promise to meet every need. And time again, Emma and her team witnessed extraordinary answers to prayer. There are stories of funds arriving just in time when they were desperately needed. And this daily dependence on God sustained the door of hope, and it strengthened the faith of all the people working there. In fact, within just 4 years, the refuge had cared for and transformed the lives of 325 girls. Each of these girls had a testimony of the power of God's grace and redemption. Emma's vision for the door of hope went beyond just shelter and physical safety. Her ultimate goal was to guide these girls towards a life-transforming power of Jesus Christ. "I can take them out of these dens of vice," she famously said, "but only Jesus can get the vice out of the girls." Emma also encouraged these women to share their newfound hope with others, inspiring many to become evangelists and advocates for those still trapped in despair. Not only did she get these girls off of the streets, inspire them with new lives, but she helped them inspire others. This is the idea of making disciples who make disciples. This door wasn't just a sanctuary. This was a lifeline. This was a place where broken lives were made whole. From that single home in 1890, Emma's vision grew into a movement that would bring hope and healing to countless lives and left this legacy of compassion and trust in God's provision. But there were a lot of challenges. First, there was societal pushback. Remember, people didn't want to have anything to do with those type of women, especially people in Emma's circle, the elite and the wealthy. In fact, Emma Whitmore's work from the Door of Hope came with many challenges. Her mission to rescue and reform these fallen women met with criticism on a lot of fronts. Society, even in the Christian circles, questioned if it was even feasible or proper to attempt to change the lives of women trapped in those type of jobs. Critics and even Christians dismissed her focus on moral reform, and they saw her as overly idealistic and even intrusive. But Emma remained steadfast. Her faith and unwavering belief in God's transformative power kept her grounded. And eventually, many of those people who had looked down on her were quieted because of her persistence and undeniable evidence of lives who were changed. The greatest vindication of Emma's work came from the stories of the women who passed through the Door of Hope. Many entered the home broken, destitute, without any sense of purpose. But with Emma's guidance and with the ministry's support, they discovered a path to physical and emotional healing and a newfound faith in Christ. These women found dignity and purpose, and many even became evangelists, giving hope to others. Eventually, Emma's work did gain recognition and even support from influential Christian leaders. One evangelist named Wilbur Chapman became one of her strongest advocates. He famously stated that Emma had likely done more to save fallen women than anyone else in America. Eventually, prominent figures in urban mission work began lauding her efforts, and then churches, not just in New York, but nationwide, began to see the Door of Hope as a model for addressing poverty and moral reform. Emma's persistence and her undeniable fruit in the ministry cemented her reputation. She became known as a pioneer in urban mission work. In her later years, Emma Whitmore remained deeply involved in the work of Door of Hope. As the mission expanded to new cities and touched even more lives, she dedicated herself to mentoring others who shared her vision of compassionate outreach. Emma's wisdom and experience became a guiding light for younger workers stepping into the challenging field of urban ministry. Recognizing the power of storytelling and testimony, Emma began writing books and articles telling the stories of the women who had come through her door. She encouraged others to embrace the call to service. Through her writing, she planted seeds of inspiration, and many other people, future generations, even after she passed away, were called to do missions such as hers. Emma Whitmore passed away in 1931, but she left behind a ministry that had grown far beyond its little humble beginnings. She left behind a legacy. Her life had helped countless women. When she died, tributes from Christian leaders and former residents honored her as a woman of profound faith, resilience, and love. Her influence extended far beyond the walls of Door of Hope. Her work reshaped the landscape of urban missions, and it demonstrated the power of faith-based outreach to tackle some of society's most intractable problems. In fact, today, modern missions and many social work initiatives can trace their roots back to Emma's pioneering efforts. Her story inspires those seeking to serve communities that people don't want to see, proving that even the most daunting challenges can be overcome through faith, compassion, and a steadfast commitment to God's calling. As we wrap up this exploration of Emma Whitmore's life, we're reminded of the extraordinary impact one person's faith and perseverance can have on countless lives. Emma's story is a story of courage, compassion, and unwavering commitment to God's calling. She turned her privileged life into a mission of hope, redemption. She lifted women that society had abandoned. Her initiative and her approach to mission work addressed physical and also spiritual needs. Today, reflect on Emma Whitmer's life and consider how her example might inspire action in your community. Consider volunteering with local missions or finding ways to contribute to programs that uplift and empower the vulnerable. Emma's life shows us what is possible when faith and love take center stage. And a reminder that missions doesn't mean having to go to another country. It could mean going down the street and visiting and helping the people that you want to pretend aren't there. I hope Emma's story encourages us to bring hope to the hopeless and to bring light to the world's darkest corners. Thank you for joining me on this story. Let's together make a vow to carry Emma's legacy forward. Thanks for listening to me today, and join me next week because I'm going to be telling the story of Edith Warner, who was a missionary to Nigeria. In the meantime, don't forget to order my books, The Church is Born, which is the start of the church, and The Church is Corrupted, which is the slow decline that led to its desperate need for reformation. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. We release new content every Monday. And don't forget to check out our website at LoreleeSiemens.com for more information and additional resources. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week as we continue our journey through the incredible history of the church.